Welcome to this part 3 of our pre-Shavuot mini-series, and this is the last class before Shavuot. And today, I'd like to explore some of the customs and the traditions of the festival of Shavuot. So I'd like to start with the preparation for Shavuot. The preparation of one's home, of the shul, of a place that we're going to be spending the festival. It's an interesting one because it's quite common to decorate one's home with flowers and plants, trees, stalks of grain, and likewise you'll go to many synagogues around the world and they'll have done the same. There'll be beautiful, beautiful bouquets of flowers and other plants placed around the shul. The reason for this is twofold. Number one, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're going through spring. And we are so far into spring by this point of the year that the first fruit and the first crops will be ready to pick or harvest. And Shavuot celebrated the agricultural milestone of the year of where the first fruit and first crops were ready to be picked. And often, these first fruit would actually be selected and taken to Jerusalem as part of the festival and actually be dedicated and donated in the temple and to the temple and the Kohanim. And this was actually a really, really beautiful tradition because it basically paid respect to the fact that although we work and toil to grow our farm produce, the fact is so much is dependent on things beyond our control. So much is dependent on the weather, so much is dependent on rain, so much is dependent on no frost. And these are things that are well beyond our control. And most years throughout history, the seasons have been good to us. And we actually have to come and appreciate the creator of the seasons, the creator of this beautiful natural system. And so for that, we would bring the fruit to the temple, paying recognition that this fruit is not just the fruit of our labor. And it's not just that nature gave it to us, but rather this is a creation. And we are so lucky to be in this world with such beautiful precision. Number two is because, as I mentioned in the Kabbalah section of this series, in part 2 and in part 1, the mountain, Mount Sinai, actually bloomed and blossomed while the Shekhinah, while the cloud of glory, was draped on top. When there was that presence of Hashem on top of the mountain, although it was a desert mountain, because of the divine energy that was just there, the mountain had no choice but to blossom. It had to produce something beauty, because there's no such thing as death when there's so much life and vibrance being pumped through. It's a bit like a body with a soul. A body without a soul is lifeless. It achieves nothing. And it doesn't really have personality at all. In fact, if you've ever seen a dead person, you'll say there is no personality, this is not the person. When there's a soul inside, suddenly this lifeless blob of flesh, being the body, comes to life, expresses in so many different ways and dimensions. So that's why we decorate our homes and our synagogues with plants over Shavuot. On the first night of Shavuot, and I say the first night because outside Israel we celebrate 2 days of Shavuot, on that first night we stay up all night. Now again, in the Northern Hemisphere that's not so much of a challenge, but here in the Southern Hemisphere it actually is, because we've moved into autumn and winter. And in autumn and winter, the nights are much longer and the days are shorter. In the Northern Hemisphere, days are longer, nights are shorter. So, although it's easier in one part of the world, and more difficult in the other, it's a universal custom that we all do. And there are a number of different reasons. And they're not really different reasons as much as they are multi-layered. On the night before the Jewish people received the Torah, most went to sleep. And there are a number of reasons, and all agree that they went to sleep to prepare. Where the reasons differ is, what was this preparation? On a very simplistic level, you'd say the people went to sleep so they could be refreshed for the experience that they were going to go through the next day. On a deeper, more mystical understanding of this narrative, the people went to sleep because there is that realization that when we're asleep, much of our soul actually departs our body. And the soul being free, and the soul not having to actually be bound to a body or one's conscious self, would allow it to tap in to something far greater than we could comprehend while we are limited people. And therefore they went to sleep to free their soul They'd gone through days of preparation in which they were physically and spiritually conscious of what was going on and were hoping for one final stage of preparation while they would sleep, that their souls would encounter some sort of experience, and when they came down the next morning and the people would wake, there would be some sort of new revelation, some sort of newfound form of preparation for this ultimate revelation, which would be the giving of the Torah en masse. Whatever it was, many people slept in. Not only did they sleep in, but they had such a deep, rich sleep that they needed to be awoken. They needed to be woken up. They needed to be shaken and said, "You're late." And they actually came late to the giving of the Torah. As a result, we choose to stay up, and when we read the Ten Commandments and we reenact what actually happened on that day, we're coming off a night of being awake. But we don't sit around. We don't sit around schmoozing. It's not a night of just long meals and just waiting for the time to pass. There are a number of different customs. Some people read a book called the Tikkun. And yes, Tikkun does mean to fix. And what it is a book of a collection of summaries and beginnings and ends of all different parts of Torah, of the actual 5 books of Moses, of the works of Nevi'im and Ketuvim, the scriptures and writings from the prophets. There are sections from the Mishnah, there are sections from the Zohar, and basically over the course of the evening we'll have touched every aspect of the Torah. And this allows us to actually prepare for what's coming the next morning. Others don't stick to such a formal guide of the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and they'll just go from class to class to class, and there are plenty of different classes in many cities in the world, engaging all sorts of different areas and talks and topics in Judaism. And so this is the general custom, to stay up and learn in some way. The next morning, we come to shul and we hear the Ten Commandments. Now this is a very, very interesting custom. There is a push in many circles for men, women and children all to make it to shul to hear the Ten Commandments. It's not a direct obligation, but it's highly encouraged. And it's based on a medrash. The medrash is a deeper insight and uses analogies and parables to explain the stories of the Torah. And the medrash tells us that when Hashem was going to the people, and in this analogy, in this story, this isn't a literal story, but when Hashem said to the people, "Why should I give you the Torah?" They said, "Because we descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. These are our ancestors. We come from great, great spiritual people. In their honor, give us the Torah." And Hashem said, "No, that's not good enough. The fact that they were good people does not mean I can entrust this beautiful piece of spiritual guidance. The purpose of creation, I can't entrust it to you because you had good grandparents." So the people came back and said, "Well, in our honor, we were slaves and you redeemed us and obviously felt that there was a value in us, so please give it to us for our own sake." And Hashem said, "That's great, but when you die, you'll have left the Torah behind, but you won't be there anymore to honor it. So I can't really entrust it to you." And the people said, "Wait, please give it to us for the sake of our children. They will be the guarantors for the Torah. They will put it into practice. We will take it, we will teach it to them, and they in turn will teach it to the next generation, pushing it forward, always allowing the next generation to make a contribution to this world in a spiritual way." And with those words, Hashem said, "I accept. I can see that your investment in the future and your care for the children is a good enough reason for me to give you the greatest works ever to be given to mankind." Because this was not just a collection of stories and laws. This was Hashem giving reason to physical existence, the purpose for why we exist. So it's encouraged that we all come. We men, we women, and we the children as the next generation. One last custom to explain for this year. Dairy. Shavuot is often known as the festival of dairy meals. It's not lactose friendly if you're lactose intolerant. It's a very, very, very tough gig if you suffer from any form of lactose intolerance, but it's a custom. It's not a law. You don't have to eat dairy. In fact, many people have some dairy, but actually remain eating meat meals or whatever it is that they normally eat on a Shabbat or a festival. And that's because those are the meals that make us happy. But a reason to include dairy in one's meal, and of course if you are going to eat dairy, you first eat dairy, then you rinse your mouth out, and then you'd eat meat, as opposed to eating meat and then finishing off with a piece of cheesecake, because we separate our cheese and dairy from our meat, and therefore there's an order to eating it. There are a number of reasons why. So here's one beautiful one. Actually, here are a few beautiful ones. The morning that the Jewish people received the Torah was Shabbat. And with the giving of the Torah, we received the laws of how to kill an animal in a ritual way which would allow it to be kosher. Because they were about to receive the law, they would be bound by the law. You can't be held liable if a law doesn't exist. But once the law is in place, one has to keep it. That makes sense. So too spiritually, the people had not been given a code of conduct in how to integrate their spirituality with the killing of animals, or even the consumption of animals. But once they were going to be given it, they had to keep to it. And because they had said in our 7 Ishma, we will do whatever we're told, they were given the laws of shchita, the laws of killing, and the laws of processing a dead animal and salting and then consuming. And they couldn't do that because on Shabbat one isn't allowed to shecht, and therefore they had to go for this 12-hour period of the day of Shabbat and could only begin shechting that night, which means on the day that they received the Torah, if they couldn't eat meat and they were in a desert, they were only left with dairy. So that's one reason why we eat dairy on Shavuot. A deeper mystical reason from the form of gematria. Gematria is numerical value and numeracy within Jewish spirituality and Judaism. Gematria, there are many, many forms of gematria, but one is the literal gematria, which is where we take the numerical value of a word, aleph being 1, bet being 2, etc., and then yud being 10, kaf being 20, tzadik being 90, kuf being 100, reish being 200, shin 300, taf 400. So we have singles, tens, and hundreds, and then multiples of each to create thousands. If we take the Hebrew word chalav, which means milk, chet is 8, lamed is 30, and vet is 2, that numerically equals 40. 40 are the days that Moses was on top of Har Sinai. So there's a beautiful little piece of symmetry. So, eat your dairy, think of these things. It's not just a nice custom. You can eat your cheesecake, your cheese blintzes, your cheeses, your wines, do whatever. But think about what is the deeper significance of why we eat dairy. And I want to finish with one last custom. The reading of the book of Ruth. Ruth was a fascinating woman. She was a convert, and she was also the great-grandmother of King David. Now, King David is actually born on Shavuot, so you'd say right there, that's a beautiful connection to read the book of Ruth. But there's something deeper. I said Ruth is a convert. On the day of Shavuot, we all became converts. We had been slaves that had gone free, but we were spiritualless. We didn't have any more meaning in our life than anyone else in this world. We didn't understand the purpose of creation. We were at our own whims to try to guess and work that out. Just like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They guessed what they knew. They discovered. They weren't given this code of instruction on a silver platter. Adam knew. He wasn't given a scroll. So they had been living off inspiration. On the morning of Shavuot, Hashem gave Moses the Torah and they gave it to the people. That was the moment that heaven and earth merged. That was a moment that was no longer the age of discovery, but it was a new age of learning, being given a text, being given a piece of work, being given a code, and being told, no longer are you to try to discover this, you are now to decipher this, and work out how to implement it in your life and in the world. So that day, we also received a different type of soul. We went from being slaves to a people with a purpose. Our purpose would be to live as Jews, and this was our constitution, our spiritual guide for what it means to be a Jew. And the 613 commandments became 613 methods of connection that our soul can do in this world with other souls and other spiritual beings within every single object of this world. And so the book of Ruth is really our story. Shavuot is the day we all converted. It was the day that we all received a soul and became fixed on our mission in life. I wish you a Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful Shavuot. Enjoy it. Take it in. Feel the energy of the day. And let it be indeed a day that we begin change spiritually. That we begin a change in this world. And that the world become a more light place with the light of Torah. Chag Sameach.